injuries, a chipped tooth, conjunctivitis, lost the ability to speak. When the family friends recovered him, they found that even when given food, little Vladimir immediately began hiding it under his shirt. I will not say more now about the Bitkovs' harrowing ordeal. Their lawyers will speak to that, as will Bill Browder. Suffice to say, Igor, Irina, and Anastasia have remained incarcerated since January 2015. In January of this year, despite an earlier appeals court ruling that the Bitkovs' alleged offense was only administrative in nature and punishable with a fine, Igor was sentenced to 19 years in prison, and Irina and Anastasia were sentenced to 14 years each. These sentences were far harsher than those given to Guatemalan officials who perpetrated the sale of passports. They are harsher than sentences given to rapists and to murderers. What was CICIG's role in all of this? I would note Bill Browder in his testimony will point out, and I quote him in pertinent part, inexplicably, VTB Bank gained the legal status as an interested party in the migration case against the Bitkovs with the support of CICIG. In January 2015, a criminal case against the Bitkovs was opened at the direction of CICIG. And as he points out, as I pointed out as well, immediately after that, 70 armed police officers raided the Bitkovs' home, arrested Irina, Igor, and Anastasia, and detained them in a cage behind the parking garage in the main court building in Guatemala City. We need to know how this happened, what was the complicity, where has the investigation been by our government, by the United States, Department of State, IG. There are a number of venues that would lend themselves to a very thorough investigation. Where's the investigation by the United Nations? All of these things are something that we are going to pursue very, very aggressively. CICIG was invited to participate in this event. And when you hear people say, oh, they're a UN agency, they can't come and testify, let me just point out to everyone, I wrote our trafficking laws for the United States of America. It's called the Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000. It is our landmark law on combating sex and labor trafficking. When I discovered that in the Democratic Republic of Congo, UN peacekeepers were raping little children, these are the peacekeepers, I convened 4 hearings, traveled to DR Congo, went to Goma, where the peacekeepers were, and invited the UN to come and give testimony. Now, under our rules, they weren't sworn in or were welcomed as absolute witnesses to the committee, but we have a very good way of having that kind of testimony. They gave us a briefing. It's a distinction without a difference. And Jane Hall Lute, who was the top peacekeeping person who was very much against what was happening there, but worked for the UN, number 2, she came and she sat right there and gave a full, thorough accounting and also a proactive approach as to what would be done to hopefully end this abuse by UN peacekeepers. I've done it other times. Kofi Annan's top chief of staff also sat here and testified. So CICIG is invited. I want to ask them questions, but they declined to be here. Just yesterday afternoon, let me point out to our friends and our witnesses, as I think you all know, the Constitutional Court of Guatemala, the country's highest court, upheld an earlier decision by a lower court that had granted the Bitkovs' appeal to be considered migrants and therefore under international law, not able to be tried as criminals. It is not yet clear what this ruling will mean. It seems to mean that the family could be released from prison, but they also could be deported back to Russia, and that would be unconscionable. So I want to make again the appeal to the Guatemalan government, to CICIG, to our government, to the United Nations, that this is the time to be focused on restoring this family as much as humanly possible and to provide them protection. They were refugees fleeing a Putin hit on them and their family. And to be treated like this, is just, it's unconscionable. You know, I've been in Congress 38 years. I chair the Human Rights Committee for this committee, the Foreign Affairs Committee, co-chair the Helsinki Commission, and I've been on that commission since 1983. Been to Russia many times when it was the Soviet Union. To know the way the Putin government follows people that they are in disagreement with, that they rob and murder and rape. And again, we got Bill Browder here, who is the author of the Magnitsky Act. It was his idea. He's the one who made it happen, which is now having positive implications for human rights promotion all over the world, because it is now called the Global Magnitsky Act as well as the Magnitsky Act, which applied only to Russia. I just want to thank him and our witnesses for being here, because that takes bravery. You should see some of the emails we've gotten. That too is unconscionable. I won't get into that now. With this hearing, I'd like to now introduce our distinguished witnesses, beginning first with Bill Browder, who has often been a witness before the Commission on Security and Cooperation in Europe. He is a true human rights advocate, fighting for the weak and the most vulnerable, has done it so effectively, starting with Sergei Magnitsky, and now the Global Magnitsky Act is a tool that the U.S. Department of State and even other governments now are beginning to adopt as a way of holding individuals to account when they commit crimes against humanity and human rights abuses all over the world. Bill is the founder and CEO of Hermitage Capital Management, which is at one time the investment advisor to the largest foreign investment fund in Russia. Many of you may remember that authorities from the government of Russia arrested, tortured, and killed his lawyer, Sergei Magnitsky, in November of 2009. And since then, Mr. Browder has sought justice for Magnitsky and, again, others persecuted by corrupt officials from the government of Russia and governments everywhere else. Without objection, his full resume will be made a part of the record, but I want to thank him for his extraordinary leadership. Then we'll hear from Victoria Sandoval, who is a criminal and human rights attorney who represents the Bitkov family. She has 15 years of experience in different areas of law and provided technical advice to the Supreme Court of Justice of Guatemala. Then Ronaldo Alvarado is the founding partner of a law firm who represents the Bitkov family. He is an expert in cyber matters and has received related training in the United States Department of Justice on those matters. Mr. Alvarado has advised Guatemalan government ministers and legislators, and again, his full resume will be made a part of the record as well. But I'd like to now yield such time as he may consume to Mr. Bill Browder.
Co-Chairman Smith, thank you very much for inviting me here to this hearing. I'm here today to present the story of the Bitkov family to the Helsinki Commission. As you know, Sergei Magnitsky was my lawyer when he was murdered by the Russian government for uncovering corruption. I started a campaign for justice, which led to this commission spearheading the Magnitsky Act in 2012 and the Global Magnitsky Act in 2016. I also wrote a book about the Magnitsky story entitled Red Notice. Following the publication of the book, many people got in touch with me from around the world to share their stories. And one of those people was a woman named Irina Bitkov. Irina Bitkov shared a horrific story of how she was persecuted in the same way as Sergei Magnitsky, and she and her family fled their persecutors from Russia and ended up in Guatemala to terrible results, which I will explain in greater detail. I'm here today to share the Bitkov story because they can't be here today to do it themselves. They're currently in Guatemalan prison, where Igor Bitkov, the father, is serving a 19-year prison sentence. Irina and her daughter Anastasia are serving 14-year prison sentences for passport violations. I'd like to point out that I have no business relationship with the Bitkovs. I'm receiving no compensation for my advocacy here today. I'm here today because of the terrible, unconscionable injustice that they've been subject to, and I want to do something about it. The Bitkov story starts in the 1990s when Igor and Irina Bitkov became the owners of a successful pulp and paper business called the Northwest Timber Company. Over the 1990s, they built their business and it reached $80 million in profits, and it was valued at roughly $400 million. In the course of their business, the Bitkov family, through their company, obtained loans from Sberbank, VTB, and Gazprom, all state-owned banks, to upgrade their facilities. After the loans were given, one of the bankers approached the Bitkovs and asked them to sell 51% of their business for $25 million. Obviously, since their business was worth many multiples of that, they refused. Following this unwanted takeover request or attempt, a terrible trauma befell the Bitkov family. At the time, their then daughter, Anastasia, was 16 years old. She was kidnapped in St. Petersburg. The kidnappers demanded a ransom which took the family 3 days to accumulate. They paid the kidnappers the ransom. Anastasia was released, but when she was safely back home, the family discovered that she had been drugged and repeatedly raped by her kidnappers. The ordeal left Anastasia deeply traumatized and set off a cascade of psychiatric ailments which require medication and treatment to this day. Following that, and in a further escalation of the attempts to take over their company, the Russian state bank simultaneously called in their $158 million of loans, forcing the company into bankruptcy. During the bankruptcy proceedings, the equipment of their facilities was sold at a fraction of its true value. The Bitkovs were then told that they would be imminently arrested. This was the moment that the Bitkov family decided to flee Russia. First, they traveled to Latvia, then they traveled to Turkey, and in Turkey, they looked around the world to seek a country where they could find refuge and start a new life safely from the persecution of the Russians. They ended up choosing Guatemala because Guatemala had no extradition treaty with Russia, and they felt that they could be safe in Guatemala. They found an advertisement on the internet from a Latin American law firm called Coutinho Associates that specializes in immigration law and advertises expertise in organizing Guatemalan immigration for $50,000 per person. The family engaged Coutinho and began the process of becoming immigrants to Guatemala. In their initial communications with Coutinho, they explained that the reason for their immigration was to avoid persecution in Russia. Coutinho explained to them that they could change their names in their immigration applications to avoid detection by the Russians. Coutinho then had submitted for the family and the Guatemalan Migration Services, they submitted for the family papers, and the Guatemalan Immigration Services issued them new documents in new names. Anastasia kept her original name, hoping that because she was not targeted by the Russian authorities, that she would be okay. The family then began a new life in Guatemala. Igor became a high school math teacher at the Brillo de Sol school in Antigua. Irina became a drawing teacher at the same school, and Anastasia began a career in fashion after regaining some of her confidence after her horrible ordeal in Russia. In January 2012, Irina Bitkov gave birth to a baby boy named Vladimir. It appeared that their terrible ordeal with the Russian authorities had come to an end, and they could put that chapter behind them. Unfortunately, their dream of a new life came crashing down in late 2003. Investigators working for VTB Bank tracked down the Bitkovs in Guatemala. The head of VTB Bank, Andrei Kostin, personally signed a power of attorney to Henry Comte, one of the country's most prestigious attorneys in Guatemala, and an alternative judge on the Guatemalan Supreme Court to assist VTB in pursuing the Bitkovs in Guatemala. VTB Bank and Comte's first attempt was to go after the Bitkovs in filing a criminal complaint with the Attorney General's office of Guatemala, claiming that VTB had been defrauded by the Bitkovs in Russia. VTB presented photocopies of forged documents in the Guatemalan court. Those documents already had been rejected as forgeries in similar proceedings in Russian courts. When the Guatemalan court requested originals, VTB withdrew their criminal complaint. VTB and Henry Comte then came up with a plan B to go after the Bitkovs. For several years before 2013, in Guatemala, there had been an ongoing investigation into human trafficking and Guatemalan's officials' complicity with human traffickers in the country. It was called the migration case, and it was supported by a UN organization called CICIG, whose mandate was to go after organized crime networks who previously enjoyed impunity in Guatemala. VTB and Comte successfully convinced CICIG to focus on the Bitkovs as part of the migration case, in spite of the fact that the Bitkovs were clearly not part of any organized network of traffickers. Inexplicably, VTB gained the legal status as an interested party in the migration case against the Bitkovs with the support of CICIG. In January 2015, a criminal case against the Bitkovs was opened at the direction of CICIG. Immediately after, 70 armed police officers raided the Bitkovs' home, arrested Irina, Igor, and Anastasia, detained them in a cage behind the parking garage of the main court building in Guatemala. While they were being held, Anastasia was deprived of her antidepressant medications, and she has a severe psychiatric breakdown. Anastasia and her mother were moved to a hospital under armed guard, and Igor was put in pretrial detention at the Mariscal Zavada prison while the case awaited trial. The Bitkovs arranged for their family lawyer, who's sitting with us today, Ronaldo Alvarado, to be the guardian for their 3-year-old child, Vladimir, while they were incarcerated. In spite of Mr. Alvarado's valid guardianship papers, the prosecutor of Guatemala filed a motion with the court calling for Vladimir Bitkov to be placed in a state orphanage instead. At this point, the Russian government also got involved. Pavel Astakov, the Russian government's ombudsman for children's rights, publicly called for Vladimir Bitkov to be returned to Russia to be put in a Russian orphanage. The Russian foray failed because Vladimir is only a Guatemalan citizen and could not be returned to Russia. However, the Guatemalan prosecutor's motion succeeded and Vladimir was placed in a state orphanage. The family desperately applied to reverse the decision and get Vladimir out of the orphanage. It took 42 days for that application to be heard. When Vladimir finally emerged, he was examined by medical experts who found he had an upper respiratory infection, severe inflammation of the middle ear, conjunctivitis in both eyes, scars along the left eyebrow, and chipped front teeth. They concluded that he suffered from physical and psychological abuses in the orphanage. In the meantime, the case against the Bitkovs for passport violations moved through the courts. They were formally indicted as part of the CICIG migration case in April 2015. The Bitkov family appealed the indictment in the appeals court, arguing that they were migrants and could not be subject to criminal prosecution applicable to the traffickers. In December 2017, the Guatemalan appeals court ruled in favor of the Bitkovs, declaring that any passport irregularities were administrative offenses punishable by a fine, and as migrants, they should not be under criminal penalty. However, CICIG and VTB were not happy with this decision, and both immediately filed appeals against the court decision that would have freed the Bitkovs. While their appeal was pending, the decision was not in force. A few days later, on January 5, 2018, the Guatemalan District Court found Igor, Irina, and Anastasia Bitkov guilty as users of the criminal network in a migration case. The court sentenced Igor to 19 years in prison and Irina and Anastasia to 14 years. CICIG trumpeted their court victory on their website, pointing out that they prosecuted 39 people from the criminal network, including the Bitkovs. I understand that the 19-year prison sentence that Igor Bitkov was given was greater than sentences for manslaughter, rape, burglary, and fraud in Guatemala. The sentences that all three of them were given appears to exceed the sentences of many of the government officials in Guatemala and traffickers who were part of the human trafficking network. There was no evidence that the Bitkovs bribed any government official or were involved in any corruption. The Bitkovs, who did not speak Spanish and did not know anyone in Guatemala on arrival, relied on the law firm Coutinho Associates, who presented themselves as legitimate migration lawyers. It also appears that nobody from Coutinho Associates who organized their passports and settlement documents has ever been prosecuted. No other customers of Coutinho have been tried, convicted, and sentenced like the Bitkovs. In the list presented by CICIG, which includes 39 people in the migration case, 36 were low and middle-level government officials from different Guatemalan government bodies, and a few coyotes who physically moved people through Guatemala. So what is going on here? There are two big Russian themes in this case, neither of which is unusual. First, in Russia, people who run successful businesses are routinely victimized through a process called reyderstvo. I was a victim of reyderstvo, and so were the Bitkovs. It is a standard practice in Russia where organized criminals work with corrupt officials to extract property and money from their victims. There are literally hundreds of thousands of businessmen in Russia who are victims of this as well. The second theme is the abuse of international institutions. The Russian government routinely abuses international institutions in order to persecute its enemies who are not inside of Russia. In my case, the Russian government tried 6 times to have Interpol arrest me after the Magnitsky Act was passed. The Russian government also successfully recruited a senior official inside the Swiss Federal Police to stymie a Swiss criminal investigation into money laundering by Russian officials in the Magnitsky case. The Russian government has succeeded in getting the Deputy Attorney General of Cyprus in charge of mutual legal assistance and extradition affecting the Magnitsky case and many other politically sensitive cases to inappropriately assist the Russian government in pursuing their enemies in Cyprus. This is not uncommon. In my opinion, the Russian government succeeded in compromising CICIG and the Guatemalan prosecutor for their own purposes in the Bitkov case. CICIG and the prosecutor's office have jointly taken up the Russian government's vendetta against the Bitkovs with no good explanation. CICIG did not distance itself from the Russian persecution. They touted it on their website, and they actively tried to overturn the Bitkovs' vindication by the appeals court. Nor has VTB tried to hide their role in this case. In spite of the fact that VTB obtained no financial recovery for their alleged financial dispute with the Bitkovs, they became an interested party in a case involving something that had nothing to do with them in order to vindictively punish Igor Bitkov and his entire family. In the Wall Street Journal on April 4th, 2018, Igor Kostin, the chairman of VTB, says, VTB's actions relating to the Bitkovs family is an example of standard procedure in resolving financial business disputes through available legal channels. This is an appalling case in which the Bitkov family deserves justice, and the United States has an opportunity to deliver them justice. CICIG is a UN organization in which approximately 50% of their budget comes from the US government. I do not believe that you or anyone in US Congress or the US government ever envisaged that US tax dollars would be spent to support a Russian government persecution of a family fleeing that persecution in Guatemala. I would recommend that CICIG's funding be suspended until this situation is resolved. When I began this process of advocating for the Bitkov family, I discovered that CICIG is a highly contentious issue in DC and around the world. There are some people who are pro-CICIG, and there are some who are anti-CICIG. Up until 2 months ago, I had never heard of CICIG. I came into this case with no prejudices, one way or another. I've gone where the evidence has led, and so far the evidence leads towards the conclusion about the involvement of this organization in the Bitkovs' persecution. As journalists from the Wall Street Journal and other news organizations have started to investigate CICIG, CICIG has avoided answering a number of crucial direct questions about their role in the Bitkov case and their support of VTB. When CICIG was invited to give evidence to Congress, they declined, claiming as a UN institution they were not accountable to anybody in Congress. They can't have it both ways. They can either be the heroic anti-impunity organization that their mandate sets them out to be, or the situation at CICIG needs to be cleaned up. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much for your very incisive testimony and recommendations. We are joined by Commissioner Holmgren. Would you have anything you'd like to offer at the opening?
No, I want to hear as much as I can, so thank you. I'll yield back.
Thank you so much. I would just note that Congressman Holmgren is also the co-chairman of the Tom Lantos Helsinki Commission and a very distinguished member of our commission. So it's so great to have you here. Thank you. I'd like to now recognize Ms. Sandoval.
Good morning, Chairman Smith. Good morning, Commissioner Holmgren, distinguished members of the Helsinki Commission. For me, it is an honor to be invited to this hearing as a witness of the Bitkov case. My name is Victoria Sandoval. I am a lawyer, and I have been working with the Bitkovs since January 15. I knew the Bitkovs back in 2011 when they came to live at the same neighborhood I was living. I could see how they were a happy family raising his kid Vladimir into his Russian culture. On January 15, 2015, I saw more than 16 official vehicles from Ministerio Público, CICIG, and Policía Nacional Civil. They were raiding the Bitkov's house, and they were being arrested. The next day, I saw the Bitkov's house had been locked up and was being guarded by 2 policemen. Even though it was guarded, their house was looted completely. They were transferred to the carceletas at the courthouse. The carceletas are the cages Bill Browder just described. These are located at the basement of the courthouse, and people should not stay there for more than 24 hours. But the Bitkovs were kept in for 5 days, Irina and Anastasia, and 9 days, Igor. The Russian ambassador didn't show any concern about his fellow citizens. Anastasia, whose life depends on the regular intake of medication, was deprived of them. A judge ordered that Anastasia and Irina be transferred to a psychiatric hospital due to Anastasia's psychiatric breakdown. The Sistema Penitenciario, in charge of that transfer, refused to do it for 4 days. It was until Anastasia's health became worse that they obeyed that order. Along with 50 agents of the Sistema Penitenciario, they were transferred to a 10-room hospital. The hospital declined receiving them because they feared such high number of officials will scare their other patients. So they were returned to the courthouse, where they were locked in an annex to the men's area, only separate by a fence, which means that the men could have direct contact with them. Not even at the bathroom they had any privacy. That meant torture for them. On the 5th day, Irina and Anastasia were finally transferred to the Hospital Concepcion, where they stayed for 1 year, guarded by 2 armed guards. In Igor's case, at the Carceleta, he was deprived of proper sleep. After 9 days, he was taken in front of the judge to give his first testimony. He was completely dumbfounded, had not been provided with any translator. His Spanish was not good at that time. At the hearing, CICIG's senior attorney, Claudia González Orellana, clearly supported VTV bank participation by stating that the attorney acting on behalf of the VTB Bank actually has competency due to the offenses that happened in Russia, and that the Bitkovs are avoiding justice in that country. They came to Guatemala and committed other offenses, and none of these can be left in impunity. We consider that the offenses that took place in Russia and in Guatemala are related. I have an audio that I ask to be entered in the records.
Without objection, it will, is ordered.
After when Igor was already at Mariscal Zavala, he was visited by the child prosecutor of the Procuraduría General de la Nación, Harold Augusto Flores Valenzuela. He told him that he had been called and visited by CICIG officials that told him that he had to do everything in order to send Vladimir to an orphanage, that he couldn't be sent with guardians. That's why Vladimir was sent to the orphanage Amor del Niño, where he was abused. Harold Flores saw that the reports on Vladimir guardians were just fine, and he chose to ignore them. Also did Judge Maria Belén Reina Salazar, and in consequence, Vladimir was sent to that orphanage. Flores also told that he was threatened by these CICIG officials that if he didn't comply, he will be fired or prosecuted. All this is written in an affidavit that Igor signed that I ask that also be added to the records, please. Okay. Anastasia's psychiatric disorder were triggered by her kidnapping in Russia, in which she was repeatedly raped and drugged. She has been diagnosed with bipolar affective disorder and borderline syndrome. According to the psychiatric reports of the National Institute for Forensic Science of Guatemala, INASIF, that also has stated that Anastasia should not be sent to a prison because it could cause her to make further attempts to commit suicide. She has already attempted 5 times to suicide. Ignoring this, the president of the tribunal, Judge Yasmin Barrios, ordered to send her to the Mariscal Zavala prison for 14 years. Judge threatening her, as well as the warden of the prison, with sending her to the Federico Mora Psychiatric Hospital if she shows any sign of her illness. There, I also have the link to a video that was recorded by BBC, where it shows the condition of this national mental hospital, qualifying it as the worst in the American continent. So I ask it to be added at the records. Thank you. Ignoring this, the president of the tribunal, the Bitkovs were sentenced for 19 and 14 years in prison last January 5th by the tribunal presided by Judge Yasmin Barrios. There are many similar cases of people accused of similar offenses, but they have all been treated very differently. Among them, I would like to describe you this one that is rather shocking. In February 2018, that means 1 month later after the Bitkov's verdict, a verdict was issued by the same tribunal presided by Judge Yasmin Barrios. 2 members of the dangerous and notorious MS-13 were condemned to suspended prison for 5 years and no expulsion for the same offenses. These members of the MS-13, Israel Antonio Cabrera, whose alias is the Demon, and Mauricio Antonio Rivas, alias the Goat, were from El Salvador, and there they have been accused of murdering 25 people. Now they are free in Guatemala's street. The evil within this, I also have this ruling that I will ask to be also added to the records. The evil within this case is shocking. The Kremlin, through VTB Bank, has conspired in the Guatemalan justice system to, 1, separate a 3-year-old boy from his family and send him to an orphanage where he was tortured. 2, to lock up in a prison a young woman with a psychiatric disorder. And finally, and third, condemn with ridiculous punishment a family who went to Guatemala in order to flee Russian persecution that was threatening to destroy their lives in contravention of Palermo Convention, Guatemalan migration law, and an order from the Constitutional Court. Anastasia told me one, I have suffered a lot. My life has never been even close to normal. I want to fight so my little brother can have a normal life. And he has still some time to do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much for your testimony and for your bravery in helping the Bitkov family. I'd like to now yield the floor to Mr. Alvarado.
Buenos días, copresidente Smith, distinguidos miembros de la Comisión de Helsinki y para todos los presentes en esta sala. Para mí es un honor haber sido invitado a esta audiencia como testigo del caso Bitkov. Tengo conocimiento.
Good morning, Co-Chair Smith, distinguished members of the... Apague el micrófono. Good morning, Co-Chair Smith, distinguished members of the Helsinki Commission, and everyone here in this room. It's an honor for me to have been invited to this hearing to bear witness in the Bitkov case.
Tengo conocimiento de los acontecimientos del caso de la familia rusa Bitkov porque conocí a Irina Bitkova y Anastasia Bitkova desde 2 años antes de su captura. Tengo conocimiento de los hechos por ser abogado de la familia y por ser actualmente y desde el 2015 el tutor legal del hijo de Igor e Irina, el niño Vladimir Bitkov, quien actualmente tiene 6 años de edad.
I am knowledgeable about what has transpired in the case involving the Russian family, the Bitkov family, because I personally met Irina Bitkova and Anastasia Bitkova 2 years before they were arrested. I am knowledgeable about the facts surrounding their case because I was the lawyer of their family and am currently, I have guardianship over their child and have had since 2015. That's Vladimir Bitkov, who is now 6 years of age. That is the son of Igor and Irina.
Las acciones por las cuales se acusó a la familia Bitkov fue por el uso de documentos de identidad y pasaportes que fueron emitidos por el Estado de Guatemala y que CICIG y el Ministerio Público consideraron que fueron emitidos ilegalmente.
So the activities for which the Bitkov family has been accused are as follows. For the use of a passport and identity documents that were issued by the Guatemalan state, and that CICIG and the public ministry or the Office of the Attorney General considered, now consider to have been issued illegally.
Esas acciones no constituyen delito. Sin embargo, CICIG y Ministerio Público iniciaron una persecución penal notoriamente desproporcionada, como si se tratara de delitos de alto impacto como narcotráfico o terrorismo.
So these activities do not constitute a crime. However, CICIG and the public ministry brought criminal charges which were egregiously disproportionate, as if they had been crimes of drug trafficking or terrorism, crimes of high impact.
Además, CICIG canalizó su persecución penal ante tribunales especiales que conocen de crímenes de mayor riesgo. Todo esto por lo que en realidad constituye una falta de derecho migratorio.
Furthermore, CICIG brought criminal charges or pursued criminal proceedings before special courts known as courts for cases involving high levels of risk, and these for what amount to migratory law misdemeanors.
CICIG no tenía competencia para participar como querellante en contra de los Bitkov, ya que el mandato otorgado por las Naciones Unidas y por el Gobierno de Guatemala establece que dicha comisión únicamente tiene competencia para investigar delitos cometidos por integrantes de los cuerpos ilegales de seguridad y aparatos clandestinos de seguridad. Y la familia Bitkov no fue acusada por formar parte de esos cuerpos ilegales de seguridad y no encuadra en ninguna de las funciones encomendadas a CICIG, lo cual implica que CICIG se extralimitó en sus facultades legales, incurriendo en abuso de autoridad.
CICIG has no jurisdiction to take part as a complainant against the Bitkov family because the mandate given it by the United Nations and by the government of Guatemala establishes that said commission would only have jurisdiction to investigate crimes committed by members of illegal security forces or clandestine security bodies or forces, and the Bitkov family was not accused of being a part of these illegal security forces, and therefore does not fall under the aegis of the authority entrusted to CICIG, which means that CICIG has overstepped its boundaries in exercising these legal powers, which is tantamount to the abuse of authority.
Además de violar el acuerdo de su creación, CICIG también violó la Convención de Palermo, ya que deliberadamente acusó a las víctimas, es decir, a los migrantes Bitkov, y no acusó a los victimarios, es decir, al traficante Cutino International.
Furthermore, CICIG, in violating the agreement that gave rise to its creation, is also in violation of the Palermo Convention, because it has deliberately accused or charged the victims, in this case, the immigrants of the Bitkov family, and did not bring charges against the perpetrators of these crimes, which is the Cutino International Organization, which is a trafficking organization.
No obstante que las acciones por las cuales se acusó a los Bitkov no constituyen delito alguno, sucedió lo siguiente. En primer lugar, el día 15 de enero del año 2015, CICIG y Ministerio Público, con el apoyo de la Policía Nacional, realizaron 3 allanamientos. Presencié personalmente el allanamiento realizado en la casa de la familia Bitkov. Duró 20 horas. Participaron alrededor de 70 policías fuertemente armados.
Despite the fact that the activities that the Bitkov family were accused of don't constitute any crime, the following ensued. On January the 15th, 2015, CICIG and the public ministry, with the support of the national police, carried out 3 searches. I personally witnessed the search that was conducted in the Bitkov family home. It lasted 20 hours, and close to 70 police officers who were heavily armed took part in that search.
Entraron a sus habitaciones mientras ellos dormían y no los dejaron vestirse a solas. Tuvieron que vestirse frente a los policías.
They went into their rooms while they were sleeping, and they didn't even let them get dressed in privacy.
No permitieron llamar a su abogado hasta 3 horas después de haber iniciado el allanamiento.
They weren't allowed to call their lawyer until 3 hours after the beginning of the search.
Pregunté al fiscal Estuardo Ernesto Campo Aguilar por qué habían tantos policías y me dijo que el caso se originaba por una estafa millonaria que habían cometido los Bitkov en contra de un banco ruso y que ese banco ruso estaba gestionando el proceso penal en contra de los Bitkov.
I asked the prosecutor, Estuardo Ernesto Campo Aguilar, why there were so many police officers, and he told me that this case stemmed from a $1 million or multi-million-dollar fraud case that the Bitkov family had committed against a Russian bank, and it was the Russian bank that was bringing criminal charges against the Bitkov family.
Incautaron los vehículos, las joyas y los bienes de la familia y posteriormente la casa fue saqueada por la Policía Nacional.
So they seized vehicles, jewelry, and the personal belongings of the Bitkov family, and after that, the National Police actually looted their home.
El allanamiento terminó hasta la 1:40 a.m. del día siguiente, hora en la cual despertaron al niño Vladimir y lo subieron, llorando e impactado, a un pick-up con rumbo a un juzgado de turno.
So this search lasted until 1:40 in the early morning of the next day when it finally ended. And that was when they woke up Vladimir, the little boy, and they put him in a pickup truck headed to the court that was open at that hour.
El niño tenía solo 3 años de edad.
The child was only 3 years old.
Todo esto consta en el acta de allanamiento, la cual pido que se incorpore a la presente acta.
All of this information can be found in the search warrant, which I would ask be admitted on the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
La jueza de turno me entregó al niño para su custodia. También nombró tutora a la niñera del niño, señora Verónica González.
So the judge in chambers, the judge on that shift at that time granted me custody of the child and also appointed as custodian of this child the babysitter, Veronica González.
El 10 de febrero del año 2015, la jueza María Belén Reina Salazar, en forma ilegal, dispuso separar al niño de sus tutores, aduciendo que nosotros no éramos sus parientes y que existía duda de quiénes eran sus padres. La duda de la identidad del niño surgió por un informe que remitió la Fiscalía Especial contra la Impunidad, FESI, donde indica que la identidad de Vladimir se encuentra viciada, lo cual sirvió para enviarlo a un orfanato denominado Amor del Niño, donde estuvo 42 días.
On February the 10th of 2015, Judge Maria Belén Reina Salazar illegally ruled that the child be taken away from their legal guardians, from us, their legal guardians, alleging that we were not the child's relatives and that even the identity of the child's parents was in question. That doubt or question about the child's identity stemmed from a report that the Special Prosecutor's Office Against Impunity, FESI, had sent, in which it states that the identity of Vladimir was flawed. And that is the rationale under which the child was sent to the orphanage called Amor del Niño, Love of the Child, where he was kept for 42 days.
La jueza prohibió visitas a Vladimir, lo que significa que lo dejó completamente solo.
The judge denied any visitation rights to Vladimir, which means that he was left entirely alone.
Salió con un diente quebrado, con una cicatriz en la ceja, con conjuntivitis y amebas.
He emerged from this orphanage with a broken tooth, with a scar above his eyebrow, with conjunctivitis, and with amoebas.
Tengo la constancia médica de los daños que sufrió Vladimir y solicito que se incorpore a la presente acta.
I have the medical records of the injuries sustained by Vladimir, and I would ask that they be admitted to the record.
That objection, so ordered.
Desde el inicio del proceso, el Banco BTV justificó su participación aduciendo que habían sido estafados en Rusia por parte de los Bitkov. La participación del Banco BTV siempre fue apoyada y defendida por CICIG a través de su mandataria, Claudia González Orellana, quien declaró ante juez que los hechos ocurridos en Rusia tenían relación con los hechos ocurridos en Guatemala y que debía permitirse al Banco BTV defender sus intereses en Guatemala.
From the outset of these proceedings, the VTB Bank justified its participation in the proceedings, alleging that it had been defrauded in Russia by the Bitkov family. The involvement of the VTB Bank was always supported and defended by CICIG through CICIG's agent that had the power of attorney to operate on CICIG's behalf, Claudia González Orellana, who declared to a judge that the facts that occurred in Russia were related to facts that occurred in Guatemala, and therefore VTB Bank should be allowed to defend its interests in Guatemala.
Los Bitkov indicaron que los documentos de identidad fueron tramitados por una firma de abogados denominada Cutino International. Cutino nunca fue investigada por CICIG, a pesar de que la familia Bitkov presentó 2 denuncias para la investigación y proporcionó pruebas suficientes para identificar a los responsables. Igor declaró que el pago a Cutino lo hizo mediante transferencia bancaria y pidió a CICIG que investigara el rastro. También se informó del caso Cutino directamente al comisionado Iván Velázquez. Tenemos un video que prueba la conversación del comisionado Velázquez con Irina Bitkova, donde ella le informa también de la persecución política del gobierno ruso.
The Bitkov family said that the identity documents had been processed by a law firm known as Cutino International. Cutino was never investigated by CICIG, despite the fact that the Bitkov family presented 2 reports requesting or reported Cutino requesting that it be investigated and offering sufficient evidence with which to identify the responsible parties. Igor declared that the payment made to Cutino was done via bank transfer and asked CICIG to look into that, to trace that transfer. It was also reported that the Cutino, that is, the Cutino case or its involvement was also reported directly to Commissioner Iván Velázquez. And we have a video showing the conversation between Commissioner Velázquez and Irina that also bears witness to the political persecution perpetrated by Russia.
Entregamos suficientes pruebas al comisionado Velázquez e incluso le adjuntamos la carta del senador Roger Wicker del año 2015, pero el comisionado no atendió al llamado.
So we have sufficient evidence, and we provided that evidence to Commissioner Velázquez, as well as a letter written by Senator Roger Wicker of 2015, yet the Commissioner did not act on that evidence presented.
CICIG participó como querellante en contra de los migrantes Bitkov y pidió condenas de 19 años de prisión, lo que no ha sucedido con otros extranjeros.
CICIG then participated as a complainant against the immigrants, the Bitkov family, and asked for a 19-year prison sentence, and such a sentence has never been meted out against any other foreigner.
Durante el debate, el gerente de la empresa que emitía los pasaportes declaró que fueron miles de pasaportes que se tramitaron en forma irregular y a favor de extranjeros. Además, el testigo Carlos René Gómez Díaz declaró que la Dirección General de Migración emitía entre 1 y 3 pasaportes ilegales por semana a favor de extranjeros. Sin embargo, solo los Bitkov fueron condenados con penas de cárcel, ya que los pocos extranjeros que fueron procesados les aplicaron condenas conmutables, es decir, que en lugar de ir a la cárcel debían pagar una multa y regresar libremente a su país de origen.
During the debate, the manager of the company that issued the passports stated that thousands of passports are processed irregularly on a regular basis and in favor of foreign nationals. Furthermore, the witness, Carlos René Gómez Díaz, stated in witness testimony that the General Office on Migration issued between 1 and 3 illegal passports every week in favor of foreign nationals. However, only the Bitkov family, or the Bitkov family was the only family ever to be given prison sentences, and the few foreigners who were ever tried only received commuted sentences. That is to say that instead of going to jail, all they had to do was pay a fine and go back to their country of origin.
Otra ilegalidad que surgió durante el proceso penal fue que previo a la condena de la familia Bitkov durante el debate, un tribunal constitucional superior otorgó un amparo a favor de Igor Bitkov, cuya sentencia indica que los migrantes no pueden ser enjuiciados penalmente, pero CICIG apeló la sentencia de amparo. El tribunal no cumplió con el amparo por las apelaciones presentadas.
Another illegal act that emerged during the criminal proceedings was that before the Bitkov family was found guilty during the discussion, a Superior Constitutional Court granted a writ of amparo in favor of Igor Bitkov, and in the sentence said that migrants cannot be criminally tried.
Anastasia Bitkova fue enviada ilegalmente a prisión con la grave enfermedad que padece y es evidente que su vida está en peligro.
CICIG appealed that sentence, and the court did not follow through with that did not adhere to the ruling that had been issued regarding the prior appeals. Anastasia Bitkova was sent to prison despite the fact that she suffers psychiatric illness, and that as a result of this, her life is in danger.
Ayer, la Corte de Constitucionalidad, el máximo tribunal de Guatemala, dictó sentencia por medio de la cual declara que los Bitkov son migrantes y que nunca debieron ser procesados penalmente. Esto confirma las violaciones a los derechos humanos de los Bitkov que he descrito en este testimonio. Además, el procurador de los derechos humanos ha dicho que los derechos del niño Vladimir fueron violados por la jueza que lo envió ilegalmente al orfanato. De manera que todo lo que he dicho tiene un soporte legal y todos estos actos ilegales destruyeron a la familia Bitkov y fueron realizados a petición de CICIG, actos que no pueden quedar en la impunidad. Muchas gracias.
Yesterday, the Constitutional Court, the highest court of Guatemala, issued a sentence whereby it declares that the Bitkov family are immigrants and they never should have been criminally tried. This confirms the human rights violations that were perpetrated against the Bitkov family that I have described in my witness testimony. Furthermore, the Human Rights Ombudsman's Office has said that the rights of the child, the rights of Vladimir, the boy, were also violated by the judge who illegally sent him to an orphanage. So everything that I have said can be legally substantiated, and all of these illegal acts that destroyed the Bitkov family were carried out at the request of CICIG and the public ministry, and these are acts that cannot go unpunished, cannot remain in impunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your testimony and for your very incisive words today. Let me just begin the questioning with Mr. Browder first. Thank you for giving us a backdrop of how the Russian officials act, Radersvo, as you said, and you also pointed out that you have been victimized by this as well, so you speak from a first-person account. 6 times Interpol, they tried to get them to arrest you for your incredible work on the Magnitsky Act. I would just point parenthetically, and the press might want to take note of this, I've traveled to the Soviet Union when it was the Soviet Union. Of course, now it's Russia. During the worst times, I was elected in 1981 on behalf of Soviet Jews, on behalf of religious freedom, and I always got a visa. When I worked to get the Magnitsky Act passed, I was denied a visa, and I haven't gotten one since. It's interesting. I had hoped to go to Russia to talk and work with them in combating human trafficking. I've worked with a number of NGOs in Moscow and elsewhere that combat human trafficking and help Russian women who are victimized. And yet, the long arm of this corruption continues to deny me a visa to go to Russia. That's nowhere near as burdensome and threatening, of course, than what you have faced and so many of these others. You also pointed out that thousands of businessmen are in jail who are victims of this, and that's the best-kept secret out there. Some journalists have pointed this out, but this is common practice. It's not an exception. It's a common practice. And so if you could, Mr. Browder, you also talked about how a Swiss federal police, they successfully recruited a senior official inside the Swiss federal police to start a criminal investigation into money laundering. So this is a modus operandi that is global, and this is a manifestation that has happened with CICIG complicity in Guatemala. How do they do it? Do they pay people? You did point out in your testimony that a very distinguished attorney was hired by VTB Bank, Henry Comte, as you point out. And so a plan was hatched, obviously, or likely huge amounts of monies were conveyed to interested parties. Then all of a sudden, with the support of CICIG, they are part of the migration case. And again, when it comes to trafficking, I take a backseat to no one because I've written count them, four major laws in combating human trafficking, including our first, and there's anywhere here, any suggestion that the Bitkovs are involved with trafficking. They are involved in trying to protect their children from, and just let me say parenthetically that the Pavel Ashtakov, the Russian government's ombudsman for children's rights, I remember when Magnitsky was put into effect, he was like the face, and others too, but he was like the key, who cut off inter-country adoptions, which had been a lifeline for Russian children finding homes, loving homes in the United States and elsewhere. But that was a total react to the Magnitsky Act, that we were finally holding people who are corrupt and commit serious, serious human rights abuses personally responsible for their crimes. So if you could further elaborate on that backdrop, because again, if CICIG, and it appears they have been, it seems absolute that they have been, but the question is why, and whether or not there were bribes involved, who was paid, why did they become a part of this? 19 years, 14 years, 14 years prison sentences. I've never seen anything like this, except in Gulag states. Yes. And Guatemala is not a Gulag state, but they certainly have a situation that is outrageous. So if you could talk about that background.
That's an excellent question and a crucial question. The Russian government has unlimited resources that they're using to corrupt and infiltrate international institutions. We have evidence of their involvement in corruption in the Swiss federal police, as I mentioned. We have evidence of involvement in the corruption of the Deputy Attorney General of Cyprus. And we have evidence of their involvement in the corruption of international organizations like the Olympics. We have evidence of their involvement in all sorts of activities like that. And what the Russian government does is they poke around to see who is susceptible to corruption and bribery. And many people say no, but they find people who say yes. And they have plenty of money to do it. They know exactly how to do it because they do it all day, every day inside their own country. And so they're experienced at doing it. And the Putin regime does it in foreign countries, and they find willing takers. And what makes it more pernicious is that once the person has become involved in their corruption, they threaten them with murder if they stop doing it. So they say, you've taken our money, if you stop doing the things we ask you to do, not only will we expose you, but we will kill you. And so people become very scared of backing down. And so we see a lot of situations where people have been corrupted and they dig their heels in even after they've been exposed because they're so afraid of the people who corrupted them in the first place. I do not have any direct evidence of why CICIG was involved in this inexplicable persecution of the Bitkovs.
But there is no doubt that they are.
The Bitkovs have been inexplicably persecuted by CICIG with the involvement of VTB Bank. That we have evidence, that the evidence has been presented today. I don't know why. But it tends to be that when people behave irrationally, when this organization, which is supposed to be an anti-impunity human rights organization, is persecuting a Russian family who's fleeing for their life, the obvious question is why? And we can't leave it unanswered. And I've seen the answers that CICIG has tried to give for justifying themselves, and none of those answers make any sense or address the crucial questions. Why were they supporting VTB in court hearings? Why did they, together with VTB, appeal the exoneration of the Bitkovs by the Supreme Court? None of these questions have been answered by them, and they refuse to show up here today to answer those questions, and you need to get answers to those questions.
Well, I would assure you, we will ask them again to come. I will pose a series of questions in total transparency. We want to know, when was the decision made, by whom, or how many people were involved with that decision, whether or not there was any kind of conveyance of financial money of any kind, anything of value. And as I said in my opening, there needs to be a full and robust investigation of CICIG's complicity in this persecution of a family that was trying to evade a modus operandi of the Russian corruption system. And this is how they do it, and they do it everywhere they can get away with it, and they should not be a part of that in any way, shape, or form. I would point out, you said it in your statement, that the Wall Street Journal, April 4th article, and you quote Igor Kostin, the chairman of the VTB Bank, where he says, VTB's action related to the Bitkov family is an example of standard procedure in resolving financial business disputes through the available legal channels. Persecute, give massive prison sentences, put a young woman named Anastasia, a daughter, try to abduct, and I would call this a kidnapping of a young boy who is not even Russian, he's Guatemalan, born in Guatemala, to kidnap him back to an orphanage, and the very man doing it is the one who ended intercountry adoptions in Russia. We got a letter to the commission from VTB Bank, from the general counsel, and he says that VTB has been a model corporate citizen. VTB has worked to combat corruption. Every action we have taken comports with global norms. Well, let's hope that they are completely, transparently open to the investigation, and will answer every question and provide every set of documents asked and requested by either the U.S. government or any other responsible body in trying to get to the bottom of this. Because this kind of assertion, when people are suffering so cruelly in prison, as we meet here today, is beyond comprehension. Let me ask you, if I could, what do you make of the attempt to abduct Vladimir and to take him back to a Russian orphanage as if the Russian government owns this little boy, rather than his loving parents and you, who have tried to provide help and assistance to him and love?
It's very clear. So the VTB Bank and their co-conspirators stripped the Bitkov family of all their wealth back in Russia. There was nothing more to get. The cupboards were empty. And so many people ask me when they look at this case, why are they doing this? Yeah. And I believe that the answer is very similar to the answer of why they attempted to murder Sergei Skripal, which is Sergei Skripal had no more intelligence to provide the UK government. But the purpose of both of these exercises for different audiences And these are all directed towards domestic audiences. In the Skripal case, it was to say, if you betray us, doesn't matter where you go, doesn't matter when you go, we'll track you down anywhere in the world, and we will kill you, and we will kill your family. That's the message to their Secret Service. In the Bitkov case, the message from VTB Bank and other banks is, if we come and ask you to sign over your wealth to us, don't object, because look what happened to the Bitkov family. We tracked them down in Guatemala, and we didn't just go after Igor Bitkov. We went after his wife, his daughter, and their 3-year-old son, and we will destroy you and we'll destroy everybody. That's the message that they're trying to send to anybody they're trying to extract money from in Russia. So the next time they go and ask them for money, the people will say, here you go, let me sign the papers.
Has CICIG or any Guatemalan authority ever provided justification why the prison sentences are so outrageously long?
I'm not an expert in Guatemalan law, but the documents that I've seen, they just rotely write down the justification by the judge, which it reads like something out of Kafka. Suppression of civil status, 5 years. Alteration of government documents, 7 years or 8 years. And none of this stuff makes any sense when you just sort of step away and say, let's look at the real world situation. As Mr. Alvarado said, or actually I think it was Victoria who said that members of the Nicaraguan criminal gangs that have killed 25 people were given suspended sentences for the same crime. How does that work?
Let me ask you, what is the relationship between Guatemalan law enforcement and judicial authorities and CICIG? How easily can those authorities say no to a CICIG instruction regarding the prosecution of, say, the Bitkovs?
I think this would be a question better for the Guatemalan lawyers.
They have a very big power. They are not accountable to anyone in Guatemala. They have the power to destroy careers and professionals. There is many people that fears them. Might be people that have something beneath them that they can be chased for, and that helps them control them, maybe. Many judges try to complacer, to please them. They try to please them at what they asked. Thank you.
Okay. Can I ask you, Vladimir, in terms of his state of health right now, you know, how well or poorly is he doing? And
después que salió del orfanato, tuvimos que contratar una terapia psicológica intensiva, ya que se despertaba en las noches y siempre tenía pesadillas y obviamente estaba muy confundido.
After he got out of the orphanage, we had to hire psychological therapy, intensive psychological therapy for him. He would wake up at night having awful nightmares.
Actualmente Vladimir tiene 6 años, yo lo recibí cuando tenía 3 años recién cumplidos. Ha madurado bastante, lo han hecho madurar a la fuerza por la situación. Y algo muy interesante que Vladimir repite es que si él no fuera niño, estuviera en prisión.
So he's 6 years old now. He had just turned 3 when I got him, and he has matured quite a bit. He has been forced to grow up really fast. And something very interesting that he says all the time, and that is, if I weren't a kid, I would be in jail.
if I could, on Anastasia, who has suffered so much having been raped, denied her medicine, as you've pointed out in your testimonies, and another manifestation of cruelty in this whole process. How is she faring?
She's having a very hard time right now, since, as I told you, she has been threatened to be sent to the Federico Mora National Mental Hospital. This hospital, as I told you before, has been qualified as the worst hospital in the whole American continent. And she fears to be free to express herself because she thinks people might interpret that as she's having a breakdown and she could be sent, because the judge, Jasmine Barrios, few days after they were sent to Mariscal Zavala, ordered the National Forensic Science Institute to go and check on her to see if it was necessary to send her to that hospital. So she's living through a living hell, not being able to be herself. She's trying to fit in what she cannot fit completely.
Thank you. If I could ask you, who is Mayra Velez? Are you aware of any positions she may have had in any of the organizations, entities that are relevant during the time period pertinent to the Bitkov case? And to the best of your knowledge, are you aware of CICIG or the Attorney General of Guatemala investigating Mayra Velez for wrongdoing or bringing any charges against her?
Mayra Vélez es la secretaria general del Ministerio Público, es decir, es la segunda, es la persona que está atrás de Tel Maldana, que es la fiscal general. Okay.
So Mayra Vélez is the Secretary General of the Public Ministry. That means she's second in authority after the prosecutor or the Attorney General himself.
Mayra Vélez trabajó en migración y tengo entendido que ella firmaba documentos de extranjeros porque trabajó en el departamento de extranjería.
So she worked in immigration policy, and she was the one who would sign off on documents or sign foreign nationals' documents because she worked in that part of the public ministry responsible for foreign affairs involving foreign nationals.
Existe un rumor muy fuerte que se escucha en los pasillos de tribunales de que Mayra Vélez forma parte de Cutino International.
Now there's a rumor that one hears constantly in the halls of the courts to the effect that Mayra Vélez is closely associated with Cutino International.
Recientemente llegó un abogado a visitar a Igor en la prisión y le compartió mucha información de Mayra Vélez. Le dijo que durante el tiempo que ella trabajó en migración, firmó documentos para extranjeros árabes de Pakistán y le dijo también que firmó documentos para miembros de ISIS, del Estado Islámico.
No.
So recently a lawyer visited Igor in jail and reported to him some information about Mayra Vélez, to the fact that for some time when she worked in migration, she would sign the documents for different foreign nationals, some of whom were of Arab descent, Pakistanis, and also that she had signed the documents for members of ISIS, that is Islamic State.
Este abogado dejó su nombre y dejó su teléfono. Él no quiere ser testigo en Guatemala porque su vida está en peligro. Él quiere que Estados Unidos lo llame y que le dé una protección especial para que él pueda dar toda la información que tiene sobre esta estructura criminal.
So this lawyer provided his name and phone number. He does not want to be a witness in Guatemala because he fears for his life. What he wants is for the United States to call him, to grant him special protection in exchange for his providing information on this criminal structure, information that he has on it.
El líder que hemos identificado de la estructura criminal Cutino, que es la estructura que CICIG no quiso investigar, se llama en Guatemala Marcos Cutino.
So the leader, as we identified him as being the leader of this criminal structure, which is the Cutino International, that CICIG did not want to investigate, is Marcos Cutino.
El abogado ha informado que Marcos Cutino tiene nombres diferentes en Estados Unidos, en México, en Canadá y en Guatemala.
So this lawyer said that Marcos Cutino goes by different aliases, different names in the U.S., in Mexico, Canada, and Guatemala.
Algo muy sospechoso en el caso Bitkov fue que cuando denunciamos a esta estructura criminal, Cutino, a los 2 días de haber presentado la denuncia que había sido dirigida a Tel Maldana, fiscal general del Ministerio Público, personas extranjeras que dijeron ser abogados estadounidenses, dijeron que ya sabían de nuestra denuncia y que querían una reunión con nosotros.
We're quickly running out of time. If you could provide, okay.
Sorry. Something very interesting about the Bitkov case that's suspicious is that when we reported this criminal activity on the part of this criminal structure, Cutino International, 2 days after that, the Telma Madana, that is the prosecutor general of the country, or we actually heard from lawyers who identified themselves as American lawyers, said that they were already aware of this case and of the fact that we were reporting this case to the Attorney General, and they wanted to meet with us about it.
Thank you.
Estas denuncias también se enviaron a CICIG y pedimos una cita a la fiscal general y nos atendió Mayra Vélez en su lugar.
So these reports were also sent to CICIG, and they asked us, ustedes pidieron se encontrar con el fiscal pidió.
Una cita, nosotros la pedimos.
Okay, we asked for a hearing, a meeting with Telma, the Prosecutor General, and rather than being met by her, it was Mayra Vélez who received us.
Considero que el gobierno de Estados Unidos debe hacer una profunda investigación del papel de Mayra Vélez en esta estructura criminal.
And so I think that this warrants that the U.S. government conduct an in-depth investigation into what the true role of Maitavelis is.
Thank you. Ms. Jackson-Lee?
Let me thank the witnesses that have come this morning, Victoria Sandoval, Rolando Alvarado, and Mr. Browder. This commission, the Helsinki Commission, for those of us who are on it, is taken enormously seriously. And I thank the presiding chair. Our time is short, so Mr. Browder, let me just say to you that my outrage is mounting, and of course, as we are involved in the trail of Russian involvement in 2016 elections, we're beginning to see certainly their despotic handprint across the world as it relates to humanitarian issues. So let me just quickly ask this one question which disturbs me. I was at the United Nations this past Monday, and I have long been a supporter of the value of the United Nations. So I am interested in how we can intervene and why the CICIG, a UN-backed organization to promote the rule of law, allowed the Bitkovs to be treated as scandalous passport violators. And is there any hope in that entity and or the United Nations, because the husband and wife are still incarcerated. The daughter, I did not hear where, so I'm sorry.
He's incarcerated as well.
Is incarcerated, and the son is now back in Guatemala?
The son is with Mr. Alvarado.
Yes, but can we just go to that question
Sure.
about how it was fraudulently made into an organization that would do what they did to the Bitkovs?
So the Russians are specialists at this. As I mentioned, they've abused Interpol in my case. And let me point something out, which is that from everything that I've been told, the concept of CICIG is a good concept. To fight impunity and fight human rights abuses with a strong organization is a good concept, as is Interpol for going after fugitives. The issue is not the organization itself, but it's if that organization is being abused. And I've seen how Interpol is abused, which doesn't make the argument that we shouldn't have Interpol. It makes the argument that we should set up checks and balances and reviews so that abuses can't happen. It appears from this gross abusive process with the Bitkovs by CICIG that there's something wrong in their controls and their reviews. And it is a highly politicized story. There's many people at this hearing, many people probably disagreeing with me about even bringing up CICIG, but how can I not when they've been involved in this terrible persecution of this family? And so there needs to be a review, and if it turns out that there was corruption or malfeasance, then those people need to be punished, and there needs to be checks and balances in place so that doesn't happen in the future. There are many UN organizations, as Chairman Smith has told us, that function badly. In the case of raping in Africa, raping young girls by UN peacekeepers, bad things do happen by organizations that are set up for good purposes. There's a bad thing that's happened here and needs to be reviewed, and it needs to be reviewed aggressively and thoroughly.
Let me just conclude my point and say that obviously peacekeepers are the soldiers that are offered by countries. I would give not the UN a pass, but I would explain that they are extensions thereof, and certainly should not be condoned in their behavior. In this instance, I think the UN can be involved positively. I would like to have a way for the Helsinki Commission to, we have a lot of hearings, but to take this issue on. It is tragic what has happened, but I think the important point for the world to hear is that Russia acts as an international thug, and what has happened is the world allows it to do so. Not the Russian people that I respect and love. I'm sure they're there doing all they can for their families. But we have to say to the Russian government, the intelligence agency, Vladimir Putin, that enough is enough in thuggery. So I hope that we'll pursue this, Mr. Chairman, and with that, I yield back.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lee. And that is why we're having this hearing. This is the first step and will be a series of not only hearings, but action items. I agree with Mr. Browder that we need to suspend CICIG's funding. I mean, this is outrageous. This is cruel and degrading treatment. I mean, even the Convention Against Torture body, the implementing body, ought to be looking at this to so mistreat people for a document, and the document was done. If my family were in that situation, and we were fighting to get into another country because the goons from Russia were on the prowl to take out their lives, so you end up with a document to try to protect you. And then you get 19 years, 14 years, and 14 years. It is absolutely outrageous. This is cruel and degrading treatment, and we will pursue this aggressively. I would like to, without ask unanimous consent, that statements by Marco Rubio, James Langford, and Michael Lee, 3 senators who couldn't be here today but wanted to express their strongly held opinions, be made a part of the record. And again, I thank you so much we're only finishing up because we do have a whole series of votes. Thank you so much for your testimony and for your leadership. Hearing is adjourned.